Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Aurelija Lucaitė-Žvinienė and I am from Hermeta Solutions company. Hermeta Solutions is a security solutions distributor, and every month we organize security webinars about different security topics. Today, our guest is Jerome Bei from Accellion company. We explore today best practices in preparing for compliance with GDPR and meet with Accellion solution Kiteworks. Before I turn the webinar to the speaker, I want to tell you a couple of things. Every one of you are muted. If you have any questions during webinar, please write them straight to the chat or write them directly to info@hermetage.lt. And at the end of the webinar, we will try to answer them all. So, have a good webinar, and I am giving a word to the Jerome.
Thanks for the introduction. My name is Jerome Bei. I am the C manager for EMEA in Accellion. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the General Data Protection Regulation. And I'm trying to split this into three parts. So the first part will be a general talk about why GDPR was given life, why does it exist, and some of the elements that will help you well, become and stay compliant in general. Then the second part will talk a little bit about Kiteworks, and then the last part will bring both worlds together, and I will speak about how Kiteworks will help you as a solution to become and remain compliant when it comes to the General Data Protection Regulation. So with that, I'm going to start right away with why is GDPR necessary. So some of you might know, and I'm going to do this really rather quickly, GDPR was brought to life to create a common base for EU-based organizations when it comes to treating data with personal characters. So the reason for this mainly was that if you look at what happened in the US, where such a regulation doesn't exist in such a form, global companies have created their own terms and conditions, and users give their data and either agree or they don't give their data and they don't agree, and then they're not part of the game, they cannot use the service. So within the EU, there is a huge market for, well, a huge single market which will develop over the coming years, and that is why we didn't want to, well, the EU regulator didn't want to have every organization playing in that market create their own T's and C's. So this is why GDPR is becoming the global base for all of this. So most people have in their mind the date of the 25th of May 2018. That's when GDPR comes into force. But in fact, that's not true. GDPR is already in force since May 2016, so over a year. It has already replaced the directive that existed before, the 95-46-EC. The only thing that hasn't happened yet is there hasn't been any fines yet. That's going to happen starting May 2018. So the full replacement and the starting of the fines, that's in a year now, or almost a year. Now, having said that, there is a difference between 95-46-EC and GDPR. 95-46 was a directive, so there's a lot of mays and shoulds in there, versus GDPR is a regulation. So companies or organizations don't really have a choice. You really have to comply with it. And when we talk about the fines in the next slides, you will see why. So the important thing here is we are already pretty late in the process. It is already in force. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the enormous fines that are being put in place. So there's a couple of things that we can mention here. One is the reason why there is at least 10 million euro or 20 million euro or 2 or 4% of the worldwide turnover of an enterprise. And it's really the worldwide turnover, so it's not just the local or EU-based turnover. Now, the reason is because organizations just tend to look at what is more expensive. Is it more expensive to become compliant, or is it more expensive to pay the fine? And in this case, for GDPR, it is definitely going to be more expensive to pay the fine. It can put a company out of business. So this is why the fines are so high. You don't have a choice. You have to become compliant. You just can't create a budget to pay the fine every year. It's just going to be too much. So let me quickly step over that. What are the implications? Well, there's a couple of things here. One is, at the end of the day, every single organization that handles data with personal character will be affected by GDPR to some extent. Now, having said that, every single organization holding or treating data with personal character has a huge opportunity when it comes to GDPR as well. It is not just about having to become compliant and staying compliant, but you know, at the end of the day, if I go back to what I've said in the beginning, GDPR has been put into place, or will be put into place, to give companies an opportunity or a base, a common base to treat that data, to profile data, to maybe even sell that data under GDPR compliance. So today, I'm sure a lot of organizations have data with personal character for the use of their business, which is not around that data, but they just have to have it. Now, with GDPR, there is a legislation that will let them use data in a different way and eventually make money out of it as well. So that's something that we can look at later on in the webinar as well a little bit. So having said that, whether you're in healthcare, finance, retail, media, manufacturing, everywhere where you treat data with personal character, you will be affected to some extent by GDPR. Whether you profile the data or not, holding it will be enough to be affected. Very quick word about the DPO. So Data Protection Officer is a role that will be put into place, which has to be a person, internal or external to an organization, that will have to oversee every procedure when it comes to personal data, and that will have to intervene if there is a potential risk upon data breach, or when data is being treated in a way that is not compliant with GDPR. So that person has the authority to review all that data and has the obligation to report if anything is out of compliance. Now, this can become quite a challenge as well, and I will come to why this could become a challenge in certain organizations. But if you just think of where that data resides, it is in 100 different places in the organization. It's not in just one place. So how does the DPO start working? We will look at that in a bit. The other thing that we will talk about as well is the records of processing activities. Under GDPR, organizations have the obligation to have an audit trail of pretty much everything when it comes to handling personal data. So whether that data is being processed internally, whether it is being transferred internally or externally, when it is part of a project, let's say, and the project runs out, when does that data have to be erased? So the right to be forgotten, the right for erasure is quite important as well. But all of that has to be traced, and there has to be an audit trail of every single action that happens to such data, which could be a challenge as well, and we will come to that. So it was just a couple of minutes looking at the base of GDPR, why it exists, and what the challenges are. Now I would like to take the opportunity and explore a little as to how, in general, and not looking at specific solutions, how organizations could start coping with becoming compliant and staying compliant. And the very first thing, and I'm sure you heard about that, is you have to understand your content. What falls under GDPR and what doesn't fall under GDPR? Where does that content reside? Not all the content is equal. Right? So there is not one policy that will cover every bit of information you have. Organizations have corporate IP, for example. Well, GDPR doesn't care about that. But every organization will have a human resources business unit. Well, that might fall under GDPR. So the first thing you have to understand is, what content falls under GDPR, and then where does that content reside today? Is that on-premise only? Is it on mobile devices, for example? If it's BIOD or if it's a provisioned device, that doesn't really matter, but does it exist on a mobile device as well? And that might be in emails or in containers on mobile devices, or in probably in Salesforce, for example. It might be in different places. Is it hosted somewhere? Is it in a data center? It does not belong to the organization itself. Or is it really somewhere in the cloud we don't even know what server it resides on? And then the next thing is, how is that content being treated? What are the flows? Where is the content created, or where is the content assembled, and where does it flow? So who gets that content? Who works with it? How is it transferred? How is it shared? Is that being done in a secure manner, or are there being emails sent left and right with important or with content with personal character? Are there any third parties involved that treat that data? Is there a payroll office, for example, or other organizations that will have to work with that personal data for me? That's something that you will have to understand as well. And once that's done, the next thing to do is really to classify and tag that content. Once you know where it resides, once you know the flows, once you know the workflows and the processes, then they have to be tagged accordingly. And you have to know if there is a new process coming or a no process dying, all of that, because that's nothing that is static. It's always, new processes are being defined as the company grows, and older processes will be removed. But all of that has to be captured in a live manner. It's nothing that is static. And that's some of the work the DPO has to do, the data protection officer has to do, for example. So once you've understood where the content resides, how it flows, one of the big things in GDPR is the right to be forgotten. So as an example, if I am a customer of your organization, we do business together, I buy something from you, or I deliver a service to you, whatever it may be, if you hold personal data that belongs to me and our business is concluded, I will have the permission to come to Ward and say, now erase the personal data that you have and prove to me that all of the data has been securely erased. And that's something that might be a little challenging, and I'll be coming to that, how we do that in Accellion Kiteworks in a bit. But the important part here is really the proof. You have to prove that the data from an individual has been moved. And I know that this is really quite a big thing because data is all over the place. If it's not properly tagged, how could you possibly know if all of the data is gone? And that's something that the regulator is really going to look after. This is really a big thing, and knowing that GDPR is being enforced locally. I mean, it's a European regulation, but the enforcement is going to be local. And I've spoken to the local regulator in my country, a couple of months ago, and they are preparing for this, or they have been preparing for this for over a year now, to do those audits and to do the tests of how you implement, for example, the right to be forgotten. And I'm sure, I'm not in the only country where the regulator is preparing to do that. So, I mean, if they prepare, we should prepare as well. We should be ready to implement the right to be forgotten. The next important thing, obviously, is shadow IT, which is part of an overall security system, which comes back to ISO 27001. And I think I'm going to talk about that a little bit as well. Now, shadow IT is, I mean, it's a big term, and you can use it in many ways. It can stand for many things. But at the end of the day, shadow IT happens when a user wants to be productive and he doesn't get the tools he needs in a secure manner. And then he will find the tools to be productive. Just a very simple example, if he doesn't have the right tools to share personal data with a payroll office, for example, well, he will put them on Dropbox and he will give the link to them. To the payroll office. In no way is that secure, but then he has created a shadow IT element. So there's a lot of ways of trying to eliminate shadow IT, but I believe that the best is, obviously, you have to secure your perimeter, you have to secure everything from the endpoint to the network. But at the end of the day, what you really need to do is give your users every tool they need in a secure way to be productive. I think at the end of the day, that's the only way to eliminate shadow IT. It's really to provide them everything they need that is secure, compliant, robust, traceable, and user-friendly, and then they will not create shadow IT options. Because if you don't do that, they will find a loophole. At least that's my experience. So once we're past that, the last step really is turn the data into information. That's the fun part, honestly, because once you've worked your way through becoming compliant, you have a huge new asset in your organization, meaning that you know exactly where personal data resides, you know exactly how it's being treated and who it's being shared with and how long. So now you can use that data for different purposes as well. You can maybe start profiling or start targeting, all under the compliance of GDPR. So you can rethink what your business is doing and how you can leverage that data. So, and that's what I meant earlier with GDPR. It's not a regulation that will cost you a lot of money. It's also an opportunity that could probably bring you streams that you don't have today. So that is the last bit of how to become and remain compliant. Now, in summary, let's just have quickly a look at what we just went through. So, first of all, content discovery, classification from all of the data sources that you have on all of the devices, and think of databases that you might have in within your organization. Think of your SharePoint, think of your Windows shares, think of all of the sources that exist, probably even in the cloud, or maybe in a data center that that somebody operates for you. And then the tagging mechanisms that you need to have behind that, or collecting that data. A second part is then enable the secure collaboration, both internally and externally. So if you're an organization that is multinational, for example, or that has multiple sites, how do I internally communicate or collaborate on that data in a secure way? How can I prove only the people that need to have access to that data? And then for external collaboration, how do I ensure the transfer of that data is being secured? How do I ensure that the data is being removed when it's not being used anymore? all of those things. And then on top of that, obviously secure erasure made and upon request. So automated means I have a project today that obviously includes data with personal character. That project is being run over, let's say, 120 days. How do I ensure that after that time frame the data is being removed from the system? And then how can I ensure to be able to prove that the data is being removed? Also, upon request. So with GDPR, individuals can come towards you, just like the example that I've given you before, and just ask you for their data to be removed, and then to be able to prove it, and that's the full audit trail. So all of the above, all of the boxes that you see in horizontal have to be able to be fully logged and traced, and you will have to be able to prove that you've implemented all of that. So where should the data protection officer start from? Well, I guess the easiest way is really to look at ISO 27001, which is all about creating an information security system. This will help to, first of all, look at access control, how data is being encrypted, for example, at rest and in transit, how to securely communicate over unsecure networks. It will also talk about business continuity, which might be less important for GDPR, but as a general business requirement might be quite important as well. And then obviously compliance is part of that as well. So as a DPO, I would strongly recommend, any DPO in any organization to start with ISO 27001. Good. So we're half through. The next part that I would like to look at is the Accellion solution Kiteworks, which is all about secure collaboration and secure file sync and share. I would like to give you a quick overview of what the solution does, and then in the third part, bring it all together and demonstrate how Kiteworks ensures compliance and ensures, in this case especially, becoming and remaining GDPR compliant. So a quick look at the Kiteworks solution stack. What is it that this solution does? Well, first of all, it is a secure file transfer and secure collaboration solution. It allows you to transfer data, no matter how big it is, over unsecure networks. But furthermore, it allows you to securely collaborate, which is a lot more than just file transfer, right? It allows you to do that on-premise, in the cloud, and hybrid. So you can have a deployment in your own network, or you could have a deployment in your network and somewhere in the cloud, or just in the cloud. Furthermore, the solution integrates with on-cloud and on-premise content sources. Now, this is really a very, very important part. What we do here is we allow to connect to your Windows shares, to your SharePoint, to your Documentum, to whatever solution you would have on-premise. And we also allow to connect to your Dropbox, to your Box, to your Cloud Drive, to your Google Drive, whatever solution you have already allowed in the past as a cloud service or a cloud content service. So we put our security stack on top of local and cloud content sources. So the nice thing in that is I can now start securely collaborating with the content I already have. In terms of GDPR, I have now the ability to transfer files under GDPR without having to move them from my Windows file shares or from my SharePoint, because the solution allows you to connect to those sources. And then on top of that, Kiteworks also allows business process automation. So Kiteworks as a solution has a documented API, a programming interface, that allows every single function to be programmed. So with that, Kiteworks allows integration into ERP system and CRM system and so we can integrate with your Salesforce and your Oracle and your SAP, and then we can provide business automation with that. So imagine your payrolls, for example, being sent out automatically through a secure system right from the HR system to an employee, for example, and having a trace of that. So it is being delivered securely and is being traced. It's being logged. So you can see actually when the file has been transferred, when it has been downloaded, who has viewed it, and that's something that under GDPR becomes very important because you have the obligation to prove, and this is your proof. Very quick solution overview and the security stack. So Kiteworks has been built with security in mind right from the architecture. So if I go from the left-hand side, we have the people, which might be internal users, which might be a customer, a partner, an employee. All of those have content to collaborate on, even under GDPR. And they would like to use their devices that they use today, whether that's a desktop, if that's Windows or Mac desktop, whether that's a web interface, or whether that's a smartphone or a tablet device. All of that is being supported. And also, they would like to keep using their productivity tools that they use today. They don't care about secure collaboration. They want to use their Words and their PowerPoints and their email client, like their Outlook client, right? As a DPO, we have to care about how the data is being transferred securely and how it's being logged. So if we keep them doing what they're doing with the tools that they have today, on the right-hand side, we have the content, which might be on-premise, like I said before, Windows shares, SharePoint, OpenText, OneDrive, whatever it may be, which might be somewhere in a third-party system, like Oracle or SAP or others. And then we have Kiteworks in the middle. Kiteworks allows then the secure collaboration while remaining compliant in terms of logging. So every single transfer of data is obviously being logged, and there's an audit trail that is searchable and that is filterable, that will show you what data went from where. So at any point in time, you can prove where the data is, whether it's been deleted, whether it's being viewed, all of the above. Obviously, Kiteworks allows secure authentication and authorization mechanisms. So we implement Radius and Kerberos, so we have two-factor authentication and single sign-on. And then, not to be forgotten, is the ICAP integration. So the solution talks the ICAP protocol, so it can implement or it can connect to a data loss prevention system, or it could connect to a tagging system, for example, if your data is already tagged and if you have GDPR tagging already available for your data, we can integrate with that as long as it talks ICAP. Obviously, no VPN required. It's all through TLS, so it's data is secured in transit and at rest, and then it obviously integrates with your directory service, whether that's an AD or an LDAP. Very good. So quickly looking at the Kiteworks 4 pillars. This is really how the solution is being developed, and these are the 4 pillars that are of utmost importance to Accellion. And first of all, it is security. I've already spoken about some of the security features, but if you just look at the plain architecture of the solution, you can see that it's being built with security in mind. It's not just one hardened VM appliance, it's a bunch of VM appliances that have different roles that you can, there's one role for the DMZ and there's a couple of roles for the intranet. And all of this has been created with security in mind, because it can connect to so many systems. It has to be quite secure. Obviously, it encrypts everything, so we have AES 256 all over the place, all of which, and that's important, especially in the cloud scenario. We don't own the encryption keys. Our customers, so organizations, own and they can rotate the encryption keys. That's nothing that Accellion will ever have in its environment. And then obviously security integrations. I spoke a little bit about that as well. So LDAP integration, single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, integration with DLP, and even advanced persistent threat solutions. Obviously, MDM is big as well. So we integrate with MDM solutions should you want to have data secured on your mobile devices as well. The second pillar that we have, and we're talking about that just today, is governance. So GDPR obviously is quite important for us. There's going to be a one-click GDPR report as well, which is going to be very easy to use. But that's not the only regulation that we comply with. So there's a couple of others. Depending on what vertical you're in, you might be interested, for example, in PCI DSS, which isn't listed here, but that we will help making organizations compliant with that as well. If you're stock listed, SOC will be important to you, or if you're in the healthcare sector, I suppose HIPAA will be important to you as well. So it's not only about GDPR, but GDPR obviously is a big part in that. Ease of use is very important. So simple access is very important when it comes to shadow IT, and that's what I said earlier. The system can be as secure as you want to be. If you don't provide an easy-to-use tool that allows your users to collaborate seamlessly using their tools that they use today, like the plugins for Office that we have, or Salesforce, SAP, like the clients that really look very, very easy to use on the web or even the desktop client. If you don't have all that, the users will find a different way, and that's where shadow IT is created, let's say. And then obviously the last pillar is integration. No matter what system you have, either we have connected to that system and we can integrate seamlessly, or we can use our API to integrate with it. And that also under GDPR will help you remain compliant, because we can automate a lot of things. We eliminate human error in a lot of places. And there's a bunch of use cases that I can talk to at a later stage or individually. So let's take a couple of minutes to look at how Kiteworks helps as a solution become compliant with GDPR and remain compliant with GDPR. So first of all, and I'm plainly going through the 4 pillars or the 4 items that I generically introduced earlier. First of all, identify and tag content. So within Kiteworks, as you can see on the screenshot here, we have the ability to identify all the content related to a data subject or to an individual very easily. Now, the important part here is it doesn't matter where the content comes from. The content can reside in your SharePoint, it can reside on your Windows shares, or it can reside within Kiteworks. We will find it. So, and that's the nice part. We integrate with all of those content sources, and we can search through those content sources, identifying every bit of data that has a certain name on it or that has certain character. And then, if you haven't tagged your data or classified your data as being personal, that's when you can do that. Right? And we could even imagine automating that part, because our API allows searching as well. So you could even go ahead and initially search using our API automatically, and then tag automatically whenever the right data is being found. The other thing that I've been talking to earlier is the ICAP integration. Should you have a tagging solution already, or should you have a classification solution already, and your data is already being tagged or classified? Well, if that solution talks the ICAP protocol, we can integrate with it, and then we can enforce whether that content is being shareable or not, whether somebody has the right to collaborate with, let's say, an external party on that content or not. So that is the first part. The second part is about the right to be forgotten. I spoke about the right to be forgotten earlier, and that there's a couple of cases where you will have to remove data from your systems with personal character. So here's how Kiteworks handles data retention. One of the things is that we have the ability to automatically remove content upon project completion, for example. So let's say you have a project today with a business partner or with a couple of individuals, no matter who it might be. Once that project is terminated, we can automatically set the date that the data in that particular data room will be removed. So what you would do is, for that project, you would create a virtual room, which is nothing more than a folder. You would invite your business partners or whoever you work with to that. You would set an expiration date, and after that expiration date, the project folder will be gone. It will be removed. Obviously, and the important part here is that we will have an audit trail of everything that has happened. And we have also an audit trail of the removal. So at any stage, you will be able to demonstrate that the data existed, has been treated, and has been securely removed. The other thing that the solution provides, if you have data rooms where third parties shouldn't be downloading anything, they should just be able to view elements with, well, let's say personal data. That's something we can provide as well. So you remain full control of the data. Nobody will be able to download it. So we have a view-only mode with watermarks, so you can invite somebody into that view-only mode. Obviously, there's expiry of that as well. And then the other thing is we provide the ability of an upload request. So you don't have to open up your systems for somebody to upload data via FTP, for example. We can do that via our web interface with an upload request. And we provide the ability of full two-way collaboration into such data rooms. The last thing that I spoke about, well, probably not the last thing, but one of the important things here is shadow IT as well. So as a DPO, I will have to eliminate shadow IT as far as I can. And I will have to implement a security system for as good as it is possible. So how can we help with that? Well, if you look at the screenshot of our solution, it's just an example of an integration with Box and Dropbox and Google Drive, and also with my local content, which is a SharePoint and my home share and our Windows shares. So all of this is seamlessly integrated into Kiteworks, and our security stack is put on top. So we put our entire security and logging mechanisms on top. We provide a live view of that content into SharePoint, into Box and Dropbox, no matter whether it's in the cloud or local. Now you don't have to. If you don't have Dropbox, well, just don't create a connector. We have customers that modify their, or have a DNS entry in their local DNS server saying that Dropbox.com points to their local Kiteworks installation, and users are happy with that. They're not using Dropbox anymore because they have a true alternative for collaborating. So they don't need to use Google Drive or Dropbox or anything like that. They have a secure alternative that is approved by IT, that is GDPR compliant, and that remains local. So if you give your employees that alternative, you can happily make, Box and Dropbox and Google Drive DNS entries point to the local Kiteworks installation. They will use it. And it works on any device, and it includes the audit trail, and it has all the collaboration features users would expect, and even more. Very well. Then the next bit here is obviously the audit trail in the Kiteworks solution. So these are just a couple of screens as an example, what we have in the backend in the management interface. And it shows you to what level of detail we collect audit logs. So you have pretty much everything, who collaborates to whom, where did the data go, did the data get downloaded by that third party or not, how long was the link valid, did a folder expire, why was that collaboration taking place. We have a task management system in here as well, so you can not only prove that the collaboration has taken place, but you can also say why that collaboration was needed, and that can be quite handy as well. So all of this is logged and traced, and it remains on our Kiteworks server, or it can be exported via syslog, for example, to a SIEM system that you might already have in place. I already touched security quite a bit, but here's a little recap of the security system as such. You own the encryption keys. As you can see on the screen here, the encryption key is something that you can rotate on the bottom right. So they're fully owned by the organization that has the Kiteworks deployment. Everything is AES-256 encrypted, at rest in transit. I briefly spoke about the access control and two-factor authentication, which is quite important as well. Another security feature is obviously the watermarks and the view-only mode. And the obviously secure access and audit trail to existing content sources. So the control over how to remotely, for example, access your Windows shares for internal users. And obviously, if you allow mobile devices to being used, all our apps on the Android store and the iOS store have which can be wiped remotely. So all of this is compliant with GDPR as well. One of the things, and this is probably the last bit for how we can help become and remain compliant, is that data protection officer role, the DPO, that has to oversee all the processes that relate to personal data. Well, within Kiteworks, we have a compliance role, and that is the only role that's obviously specially secured, but that role can monitor access to all of the data, and that role allows you to make your assessment when it comes to GDPR, and obviously gives the ability to act if there is a breach. I also spoke about the ICAP integration a couple of times already, which allows for DLP scans, and that's absolutely fine. But under GDPR, the DPO has to be a person, it cannot be an automated process. That person has to oversee all of those processes when it comes to handling data with personal character. Good. The last bit obviously is documentation, which relates a little bit to live compliance, because you cannot just document how you have become GDPR compliant. That is one thing, and it's good to have, but your processes will change and your workflows will change. So, and you know how it is with documentation. That will never follow. So when you have a live compliance system, your documentation is always up to date. It's in your audit trail. It's in your logs. So you don't have to worry about keeping up with documentation. Your access control is being documented automatically in the system. Whenever you give or revoke access to somebody, there's an audit trail for that. So you have a live documentation for that as well. Okay, so active versus passive security, that's the important part here. And the documentation of such an active security system that will never keep up if you have to do that manually. Good, so I guess I'm done with the slides, and we have a couple of minutes left. If there are any questions that we could look at.
Thank you, Jerome. It was very informative presentation. And let's wait some questions. And I see one.
I cannot control who is authorized to use the Accellion system. So that's a question that came up.
Yeah, so please answer.
Yes, so absolutely. There's so the short answer is obviously yes, absolutely. It is under full control who can use the system, but it goes way beyond that. For internal users, obviously you control that through your Active Directory, through your LDAP, through your SSO or 2FA or MFA system, and you can provide roles to users. You can give or revoke access to users based on their Active Directory group, for example, and that's just one thing. Now, and that's for internal users, and then for external users, you will obviously give access to individuals specifically, and you will define what type of access to what type of data they can get. There's a couple of roles here that goes from a viewer to a downloader to a collaborator to a manager. That's the different roles that you can give someone on a specific bit of data, on a specific folder, and that's something that can expire if you want it to expire, and it's something you can revoke as well, obviously. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and we have a second question.
Yes.
How does the recipient log in to retrieve the file?
Yeah, so there's you can give access to data in several ways, as I said, but in general what happens is I have a bit of data with personal character and I need to share with an external company. And let's say I want that external company not only to view, but also be able to work on that data, edit it, and send it back. So what I will do is I will set up a collaboration folder, and I will invite that external recipient into that collaboration folder. That person will then get an email where he will self-register, so that he has to prove that he is who he claims to be. He will have to register and then get access to the bit of information that I've given him access to. That's one way. And then real collaboration can happen in that folder, right? Because I want them to be able to edit and so on. Now, if I only have to send a file, well, that's easy. I can use the Outlook plugin, I can use the web interface, I can use the desktop client to securely send the link to a file. So what the Kiteworks system will do, it will not send the actual file, but it will upload the file to the Kiteworks system, it will generate a link that will let the third party log in with a self-service created account and then download the file. So I can see there is a third question. What is the file size limit for this service? Actually, I don't think there is a limit. We test the system with files that are up to 10 gigabytes big for a single file. But I know we have customers that transfer terabytes of data. Now, obviously, there is a limitation to the local browser. The local browser will, stop at, I think it's 2 gigabytes or something like that. But you can always use the desktop client. Our solution can sync as well. So you can transfer, there's we don't really know if there is a limit. We tested for up to 10 gig single files, but we know there's customers that use way bigger files than that. There is another question: how is the solution licensed? So this license is per user per year. So it's a subscription model. For internal users, all of the internal users have to have a license if they access the system. If they don't access the system, obviously they don't need a license. For external users, only the ones that you say are collaborator need a license. So somebody who just downloads or somebody who just views files doesn't need a license. And then even those that are collaborator, if they stop logging in if they don't log in for 30 days, the license gets freed up. So it's kind of concurrent. And then if they log in again, they consume a license. So it's quite dynamic in that sense. And then, as I said, it's a subscription license per user a year. Okay, I can see another question. How do I configure the Accellion system within my firewall? That's an interesting one. Now, there's a whole presentation around that, which would be probably too big for this webinar. But now, the important thing here is that we have roles within our system, and let me show you. As we are here, hopefully everybody can still see my screen. Here's an example. So the system consists of a single VMware that you can import into your virtual environment, right? And then you give that system a role. So, for example, in the DMZ you have a web role, and then in the intranet you have an application and storage and search role. And then to connect to your SharePoint and then your Windows Share, for example, you have an Enterprise Connect role. So using this system, you will never have to expose your Active Directory to the DMZ or your mail server. We just connect to it wherever it is. You will never have to expose or to give open ports from your SharePoint somewhere to the external world, right? And this communicates over web sessions, right? So you don't have to open anything. Just to give you another example, this is hybrid. So there's obviously a method of hybrid storage. If you find that, for example, cloud storage is cheaper than your local storage, well, you can go for that as well. And you can have on Azure, you can have SharePoint Online, for example, that you want to connect to. So that's possible as well. And let me give you, to finalize, a very quick example of a high availability setup. So we can do this as well, and we have customers that do it. To give you an example, Verizon in the US has 100,000 seats. That's our biggest deployment, and they have a high availability built into the system with replication of the data, with syncing of everything from our databases, and then with access from multiple sites to the Active Directory and to SharePoint and to Windows shares. All of that is possible. All right. So there's a couple of other questions. So that was the firewall. Is it possible to check the health of an uploaded file? Yes, in a sense. The software will, once a file is completely uploaded, will tell you so. So it can send you an email to make sure that the file is properly uploaded. But also it will create a hash of the file. So if you want to, you can create a local hash of that file and compare it to the hash in the system. And then the last one, I think that's the same question, possible to health check a file. Yeah, so that's possible in two ways, with the hash or by the email that you receive when you have uploaded the file. Okay, very well. Any other questions?
So I see no more questions. If you have more questions or want to try Accellion solutions, please contact with Hermeta Solutions team.
There's one last question here: how Kiteworks handles duplicate files. So let me very quickly add that there is no duplicate file in Kiteworks. Because we know the hash of every file, when a file exists multiple times, we upload it once and create internal links to those files. There's no duplicates in our system. And we can version files. So if you create of the same file a new version, obviously that creates a new hash. And to us, it's all objects. And objects have versions. And so we have the ability to trace every version of a file. And I think that was the last question.
Thank you everyone for coming. I hope this topic was relevant to you. Thank you, Jerome, of course, for the presentation and showing us how to be GDPR compliant. Very good webinar.
Thank you very much and have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thank you and have a great day.